This and all talks at the 2020 JavaScript for WordPress conference are brought to you in part by our sponsors Frontity and GoDaddy Pro. Frontity is the easiest way to create performant websites using WordPress and React. It connects both seamlessly so you can focus on building your site instead of all the tooling and configuration. Open source and free to use. GoDaddy Pro Hosting offers a robust suite of free tools to web developers and designers to help them save time managing all their clients and sites. Your free membership also includes advanced 24/7 technical support.
Hi everyone, how you doing? I was telling Mary that even though the talks this time are online, it doesn't. It's still the same pressure as a live talk in a WordCamp. So it's great to have you all here, and we're going to start learning about some of the how to provide stability and make assertions that over the JavaScript in our WordPress plugins or themes. Particularly, we're going to focus on working with a very simple WordPress plugin that just pulls posts through the REST API, and we're going to make some assertions to ensure that everything is working well. To do that, we're going to use Jest, which is a test framework. It's usually used for testing React applications or like Vue applications, but we can use it also to test the vanilla JavaScript that goes into our WordPress plugins. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen with because I have some slides for you. And share. Okay, I hope you can all see this, and we're gonna start with the testing JavaScript in WordPress plugins talk. I'm Elio Rivero. My site is the Start Function, and I work for a lovely company called Reconnect. You can find the link at reconnect.io. I'm a software engineer there. I usually work with creating a React application. We have a PHP backend. I'm really not into WordPress too much currently, although I'm still administrator for the WordPress Argentina group. In the past, I have been very involved with WordPress since 2006, maybe. I worked for Themify.me, a Canadian company that makes beautiful themes. And then I joined Automatic for about 4 years. And now at Reconnect, we place a lot of emphasis on asserting the stability of our applications. And the library we use is Jest. So I'm going to talk how we can transfer that knowledge and those techniques of testing React applications to testing the JavaScript, the pure JavaScript, the vanilla JavaScript of our WordPress plugins. So testing. So you will see in the slides these landscapes. I thought about adding some cute puppies, but I thought about since we have been inside for all these months due to the quarantine, I thought it would be nice to make a trip outside, and I'm going to show you some photos I made in my beautiful country, Argentina. So let's start testing. Why do we do testing? We basically want to test that the code we are writing is doing what it's supposed to be doing, right? So that whenever we write a new piece of code, that it won't deviate from its purpose. But we also need to test that it doesn't do what it's not supposed to do, because sometimes we test all the right cases and it's working fine, but we sometimes forget to test the odd cases when the data is wrong, when something is undefined, and at those times also has to work. It doesn't have to fail. So we need to consider in both cases, like when things go right and when things go wrong. So we basically do testing to ensure that our application, or if we are already in a big application and we're developing a new component or a new piece of code, that it meets the requirements that the requirements that maybe the stakeholders or the project managers have set for this application or this component. Whatever we code has to meet those requirements. And it has to respond correctly to different inputs, which is why I was saying earlier that not only the correct input, because the user is not always going to do the right thing. We need to ensure that it's resilient and it can accept and tolerate different inputs. Testing is also useful because it basically describes what the component does. In that way, it serves like a living documentation, right? So we see the test and we see that it's supposed to be doing this, it's supposed to be doing that, it's supposed to react in this way to that input. So all this describes internally what is going on in the component without us going into the source code. So we can just see the tests that we have written or somebody else wrote, and have a pretty good idea about what the component or the application does and how it integrates with other things. It also protects against regressions. Typically, sometimes the snapshot testing is used against regressions because maybe you added a new class and you have a previous snapshot that it had a different class, and you can assert that. But we can also do that testing, what Chest does, inspecting the DOM and the properties of the code we're generating, and protect ourselves against future changes that might render that might affect the output of our component. We're gonna see in this talk like two areas of of testing. There are a lot of areas, like for example, acceptance testing, end-to-end testing. We're gonna focus on unit testing and integration testing. Unit testing is when you test a single piece of code isolated from the rest. So basically, you test like whenever you insert an input, it outputs something, and you make assertions about that. There's an analogy of all tests based on a car. Like for example, a wheel. Unit testing performed over a wheel is when you have the wheel in front of yourself and you just push it, and you can test that it rolls. That will be unit testing. And we can unit test many things, like functions. We provide a certain input to the function and we get some result. We can test classes. We can test React components. They are usually tested with Jest, like I say, and these libraries to inspect the DOM, like Ensign or React testing library. You can also test Ember components. They are usually tested with QUnit. And in the WordPress realm, we use a lot PHP unit to make assertion about about single units of code. In WordPress, there are also some tests written using QUnit, mainly in WordPress core. And then let's jump to the integration testing. Integration testing is when you get a bunch of single pieces of code and you test them all at once and make sure that they are working with each other. For example, the unit test of the wheel. The wheel, when we attach it to a larger element, that will be an integration testing. And the analogy is that if we push that car where the wheels are attached, as the car moves, that will be and integration testing. So for these tests, we're going to use, like I said, Jest. Jest is a library developed by Facebook. It's very popular. So it has like, I was looking today, and it has like 7 millions of weekly downloads. Like, that's like 28 millions a month. And there are 2 million of dependent repos. So Jest is very is thriving and is constantly being updated, and you find a lot of documentation to use it. So the beauty of REST is of Jest is that it's a single package for a lot of things. A long time ago, without Jest, you will have to use 3 different packages to do the same. For example, Jest is a test runner, and you can make assertions, and you can spy or stub elements. To do that, in the past, you will have to use Mocha for a test runner. You will have to use Chai for make assertions, and Sign-on to make to spy on certain functions. But just for example, you can run all the tests using test or it, which is an alias. You can group a lot of tests with describe, and you can make assertions with expect and to be, and it also has functions to method to spy functions and mock modules. So it's a very complete solution. You can also run Jest in a watch mode. So whenever you, so it keeps running in the background, and whenever you update a test or a piece of code related to that test, it will automatically run the test that was affected. So when we write a WordPress plugin, we basically usually have these 3 files, like a PHP, which is essential, a style sheet, and hopefully a script.js. However, to test our files, we will or to test our JavaScript, we will need an additional file, the test.js, for example. This is the file where we will write all the Jest tests. And Jest is smart enough to look for this file or similar files in different locations. If you call it test.js and it's okay, and you will find it. There's a convention though that the test files have to be stored in these _test _ folders. You can group all your tests there, and you can prefix them with the name of the portion of code that they are testing. So to make this more interesting, because we could just use Jest and test it in a just test the JavaScript of file without caring about whether we need to compile it or bundle it with other elements. But it's 2020 now, and we have grown used to all these tools, so I'm going to make a brief mention about all this. But first, let's begin. Let's roll back a little bit and start looking at how a simple test with Jest will look like. You can see that I made a very simple folder here. We only have an index that will load the JS file. The JS file is very simple. Only has a sentence that reverse words, and if we look at it in the front end, it will log to the console this. So if you input to this file, this is fun, it will reverse the string and will out to the console fun is this. Okay. So in order to write the Jest test, we need to load this file. The thing is that when you leave this line, this is not a line understood by the browsers, so it's going to throw an error. So Eventually, we will see how to compile, which is why I wanted to introduce all the tooling like Babel and Webpack, because this is a reality that we no longer test, we no longer write code without in isolation, let's say. So basically, these test sentences are all that we need to run the chest tests. We make an assertion with respect over the result of this function, and the assertion is that that whenever we input this is fun, that the result is fun is this. We also test that it works properly when the input is empty. And to run all this, we're going to see later how to do all this, which is yarn test, which yarn is a package manager, and we will see later. So what it does is call this, calls test, and we call chest, and it runs the two assertions. We're going to see now.
Elio, sorry to bother you.
This.
Could you increase the size of your font? Sorry to bug in. The font size.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Maybe a little bit more, just a little bit more. Yes, just a little bit.
How about now?
Yes, yes, that should be okay now.
Okay. So we're going to see how all this is built. So we have our JS files. We'll eventually have a SAS style sheet, and those things are not understood by the browsers. So we need to compile all this to a JS and a CSS file that the browsers understand. And to do all this, we need first to install a package manager. We need to initialize npm in our project. And the package JSON is what will allow us. Let me go back to this. The package JSON is what will allow us to run jest using this test. So to initialize a package JSON is very easy. You do need to have a node installed in your system, but after that, it's just npm init, and you go through a series of prompts that will ask you the name of the test and what's the main file, the license, and this is the line that we were interested in is in the test that will run jest. This is usually this is not usually. This has to be in the scripts entry, and the script entry will in the more advanced project that we'll see has a lot of options, like to run jest in the watch mode or to build our project for the final output of the files. After that, we need to install jest, which is also an npm package, which is to install it as a developer dependency, because we don't need it in the front end. We don't need it in the browser side. We just need it to run locally using the command line. And when we do that, it will be added in this new entry, dev dependencies at the bottom. It will add the jest package, the version. The next thing we need to add to compile this JavaScript so it's understood by the browsers is Babel. Babel is a JavaScript compiler. And we need to install the Babel core, the preset 10, which is what actually translates everything to language that to the JavaScript version that the browsers understand. And there's an additional package to integrate jest with Babel that we need to include too, because we're going to be working with it. And once that is done, we also need to install Webpack. Webpack is what will bundle all the JS and the Sass files. For example, in our case, it's going to be very simple because I think I can show you something. It's going to be very simple because even our big test only has one JS file and one CSS that will be translated to a front JS and a CSS. However, in other cases, you could have like multiple JS files and even written in different languages. Well, it's not different standards like TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript. So what Webpack will do is grab all these different JS files and all these style sheets and will compile it in a single JS and a single style sheet. So you only need to load one in the front end. To install Webpack, we also need to install it like a dev dependency npm package. And then here comes a common pitfall that when writing the test for when writing our test using Jest. Sass, you probably heard about Sass because it's been along for a long time. It's a CSS preprocessor that allows you to nest CSS declarations, to have constants. Sass does pose a challenge when we write tests because of their imported style sheets. And we're going to start with the big testing sample. So this is our big testing sample, and I'll give you the URL for a repository later. You will see that the package JSON of this one is very similar to the basic one. We have all the things that we installed in the slides here: babel Jest, babel loader, and CSS loader Jest. And there are a lot of small packages that where we installed for the CSS, but those are not interesting. So our package JSON has the test command that we saw. We also have the test watch, and that we will see in a minute. And we have the build. We have our PHP code for a plugin. And this is what is interesting, that we have this Sass style sheet. And for the Sass style sheet to be loaded by Webpack and compile it into a CSS, we need to import it in our JS file. Because our Webpack is going to load the main JS and it's going to convert it in front JS. And whatever is imported into this main JS file is going to be also handled by Webpack. If it finds a Sass style sheet, it's going to compile it using these tools, and it's going to output in here. However, this is a challenge for Jest, because Jest does not recognize these files, and it's going to attempt to load it. So what we do, this is our challenge in our JS file. What we do is to set a mock for that. I wish I could swap my desk without having to quit the slides. So when we have a Sass style sheets, we need to create this new file, jest.config, which is also in the root of the directory. And we need to tell Jest with this that whenever it finds a CSS, a Sass, or a SCAS file extension, that it uses this mock. And this mock is like a fake module. Instead of loading this the actual CSS style sheet is going to load this file, and this file has nothing, so it won't fail when we run it. So that's a way to cope with Sass style sheets. And the next challenge we have in WordPress plugins is that we write WordPress global variables from PHP to JS using this sentence, the WP add inline script, and that's okay for the JS in the page, because the JS in the page just reads that variable and loads it, and everything works well. However, that variable, since it's written by PHP and we don't run PHP with Jest, that variable is undefined for Jest. So the way to cope with that is to, in our Jest config, we tell it to use this file before the testing starts. So in this file, we're going to define this variable. And let me show you the plugin, the PHP plugin. The PHP plugin doesn't have any mystery. It's just a basic plugin that includes a style and a script. The interesting part is that we add this variable here, and we use this variable in the front end. So this variable name, this global variable, is what we have to mock here and set it at least to undefined. We will later see that in the test we're going to define this, and so it works. And let me go back to the slides. So this is the variable that we saw, and we mock it here as undefined. So when we solve these two challenges, the global variables and the Sass style sheets, we're ready to start writing the unit and integration tests. And what we're going to do is test these things. Like I said, the plugin that we built is a simple plugin that fetches through the REST API 5 posts and insert them in the content. So we're going to see what happens if the insertion point is not there. We're going to simulate a click of a button, and we're going to simulate when we fetch posts from the backend. Let me show this very simple test. The final repository is here, and this is what is happening when we click the load posts. Yeah, for a second I thought it wouldn't work, and it adds all these posts that it fetched through the REST API, and remove the button. The JavaScript for that is in this file, and let's go through it. Actually, I think I can focus more if we do. So this is the entire file that performs these actions on the plugin. This is not using jQuery. This is just vanilla JavaScript. Whenever so this DOM content loaded is similar to the jQuery ready or document ready. And whenever it's ready, we're going to run this function. And this function, you'll see that also that this is a fat arrow function. It's not the usual functions from that we found, like function W. But it's the same, except it's written in this fat arrow function notation. So whenever we start a function, we look for the global variable, the WP Jest tests. And if we have the number of posts we have to fetch, because remember we set here the number of posts we're gonna fetch from the REST API. If that is not there, to exit the function. If that's okay, we go and check if we have this div in this element in the DOM, the entry content, where we usually output the content of the posts. If it's not there, to return. And if it's there, to insert this button, which is the button that we saw that we click to fetch the posts. And we're gonna save this the button. We're gonna save a reference to the DOM element to use it later. And we go here and we attach an event listener. So we're gonna list for a click, and when somebody clicks the button, we're gonna load post. It's gonna come here. This is another filter function, and it's gonna fetch the post from the REST API. This is another property that we added to the global variable, the URL of the REST API. And we use this is a regular endpoint defined by WordPress. I didn't write this. This is just a standard endpoint, and we're gonna pass the number of posts we want to fetch, and that returns a promise that we have to resolve. If it's not okay, we'll throw an error and an end. Otherwise, we return a JSON serialization, which is also another promise. And when we resolve that promise, we're gonna run this code. And first, we add a class. We don't need to add a class. I just did it to test it. We're gonna see that in Jest we can test if an element has a certain class, and we're gonna remove the button, and we're gonna add the posts that we fetch from the REST API. And if that didn't work well for some reason at any point of the data fetching, all the promises, we're gonna throw an error, and that's it. Once we add the post to the content, it's done, and we can now let's move to see the test for this file. As we explained in the beginning, one of the conventions is to use this folder, _tests, and write the name of the piece of code that we're testing, adding a suffix of test, and Jest will find that and will run that. So let's first run this. Okay. I told you before that you could run Jest in a watch mode using this flag. We already have the defined in the package JSON, so I just need to do run test watch. So we see that it ran all the tests, and all the tests for now are passing. And let's begin with this. In the beginning, what we wanted to test is that if the variable is undefined, that it exits properly, that it doesn't continue moving forward. And to start testing our code, we're going to import this, which is we exported here this function, okay, and we import it here. So we started, we grouped a series of tests because these are are similar and deals with missing something to properly execute the code. So if we make the first assertion, if the global variable is undefined, that we need to exit, and we actually call that function. We call this, and notice that previously we defined WP to be undefined. So it's gonna fail, and the output that we expect is to be false, which is what we return here. So that works. That works because where this test is passing and it's asserting that the function ended with false. Now the next one, if entry content is missing, we also need to exit. And this time we define this variable. This is the same variable here. We assigned this the number of posts that we want to fetch, and we're gonna use this. We're gonna mock a selector, the query selector, and we're gonna tell that whenever some code calls the query selector to make a fake result and return undefined. So this is what will happen here. It won't call the original document query selector. Instead, the test will call the query selector that we just mocked and will return undefined. So when we test, when we run the test, entry content, this variable here, will be undefined and will return false, which is what we expected to happen. So that's okay. Additionally, we wanted to be sure that that this function was called, so we make this assertion to have been called times 1, because yeah, we wanted to call it here. So those two tests are passing, and we're going to move into a more complex one. So we're gonna if we had written a lot of tests, we could have grouped this in another group, which is because we're going to test the specific functionality when we fetch posts. And so before all the tests start running, oh, I was forgetting. We have this instruction here. After each test is run, that means this test, all the mocks, all the fake functions are going to be cleared. And we need that because we're mocking this query selector, and we're going to need to mock it later to a different value because we use it to query the posts here. And we're going to see how we do that. So this will clear all the fake functions. And this is something similar, except since it's a scope to this describe block, it will run for all the tests within this block. We're going to initialize the global variable to fetch 5 posts. And this is the more important thing. We need to test, sorry, one more thing. These two are unit tests because we just test what happens with a specific input. So the function begins and ends, and the output is what we expected. So these two here are integration tests. They don't communicate with the exterior. They don't do anything apart from the code in its own code. However, the next test is going to be an integration test because it deals with what happens when we make a query to the server. The result here is beyond this code. It doesn't. It's external to this code. We can't, though, make a request to the server because obviously we don't have a server. So we're gonna mock that response. And to mock that response, we basically need to do everything that response will do. So we saw here that when we fetch, we have to resolve 2 promises. the first promise resolves JSON, and the second one will result to the final what will finally happen. So we need to resolve that, and this is the first. The first promise resolves to the server response, and the second one to the JSON serialization. So the first response, we're going to mock that result, which is the server response, and the second is resolving to the actual JSON parsing. Basically, what we will have from the server is similar to this. Let me show you here. So the REST API responds with all this, but we are only using the title, which is here, and the link, which is here. And this is all we need to. I didn't even add a full URL. I just added some text. We could have the full URL. That doesn't matter because we don't need to test that it was a URL. And after each test is run, after all the tests are run, we're gonna clear this fetch mock instead of in case we have other fetch in a much larger code that we need to mock differently. So let's begin with this. We're gonna test that when we click the button, we fetch the post and we insert them correctly. We need to mock a lot of things for this because this deals a lot with manipulating the DOM and even DOM events like this, like the click. So let's go first to see what we expect to happen when we run the function this time. This time we have everything defined. So we have the number of tests. We didn't mock this function to be undefined when the query selector, when the entry content is found. Instead, we mock this function to return an element. And when we return this element, we need to return like almost everything that we need to make assertions on a DOM element. So we're gonna mock a class list and its sub method add. We're gonna mock the inner HTML. We're gonna mock everything that we use in this code: class list add, remove child, inner element. We're gonna mock everything so we can test and make assertions on the result of that. So when we run this time, it's gonna return true, which is what we expected, because it went through this and everything was defined, so it's okay. It went through this and it returned an element, so it's defined, so it don't exit. And then it went through all this code until it reached this sentence and returned true. So that's the final result. And so we need to make sure it's okay. And then we're gonna dispatch, we're gonna simulate a click. This is a way to simulate the events. So basically what we are doing here is mocking this dispatch event, which is a real function, a real method of a JavaScript element. But we're gonna mock it and instead pass this function that whenever we call this function, it's gonna add to this array, this object. Sorry, it's gonna invoke it because of this presence. This is like a imagine that this will render to something like click. Okay. will invoke this callback. This callback in this server was set by the add event listener, which is what we use to add the click event to the button, and we pass the function. So the events click now holds a reference to this function. So when we trigger a click, it will actually go here and will call the click. And what we have inside the click, which is here, is the original function, the original function that loads the posts. I mean, this will be this. Okay. This is a bit complex because it deals with mocking all the these DOM events and calling the functions. What did I do? Okay, so we trigger a click. At that moment, we expect a lot of things to happen. At that moment, we expect the query selector to have been called 2 times. Why? Because we call it once here to check that the entry content exists, and we call it a second time here to store this the reference to the button. And then we expect this to have been called, like we say, with entry content, and another time with load posts. So all that is good. If that passes, it's okay. And we expect this the mock for fetch function to have been called at least once. And then we expect to have the class have been added, and we expect the button to have been removed. All these mocks are here. The mock class list class. Yeah. And finally, we expect to find the text that we inserted in the post. We expect it to be 5 because we wanted to add 5 posts. All this is run in this process next tick, which is a way, which is an instruction from Node.js. So it runs in the next when all the events in this current stage have ended. This is particularly needed because of the dispatch event. When all this has happened, when it will run the next, it will run all this. And we need this because we are expecting a fetch that has to resolve 2 promises. You saw that we didn't use it here because everything was immediate. Instead, in this, we have to resolve all this, so we need to tell him to wait until the next time. And when this is done, when we have finished running all the assertions, we're going to use this special parameter that is passed to test. Done. This calling this function tells Jest that the test has finally ended. So we didn't need to use it here because, like before, everything is immediate. But we have to wait here. So this is a way to tell Jest that the tests have ended. And that's pretty much it. So all the tests are run. They are passing. I'm gonna quit this. And this is another instruction that we have, like we saw before, that we had this main.js that is using all these syntax like arrow functions that are not understood by the browser. I have another command in my package.json, the build, that will run Webpack in production mode. And when we run Webpack, like we mentioned before, it's going to write these 2 files. And those 2 files are what we want to load in the front end. Yeah, and that's it. I'm gonna upload these slides later, and I will send you the link, and you will be able to see the repository and everything, all the code in it, to study it more closely. I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna go back here. How do I stop sharing? Oh, I'm not sharing. Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much, Elio, for that very detailed talk. I think your video is still off. We can't see your face. Okay, great. You're back. Okay, I think you got disconnected. Okay,
Can you see me
back
now?
Yes,
Okay.
I can see you now. Great. Thank you very much for that presentation. If anyone has questions for Elio, please drop them, or you could send him a tweet or DM him your question much later. We're getting close to the end of the JavaScript for WordPress conference. We have 2 more talks left to round up the day. Okay.
Well, if you later want to throw me some questions, you can find me on Twitter. Elio Rivero is my handle there, or on Instagram, also Elio Rivero. Or GitHub, also Elio Rivero. I'm basically Elio Rivero everywhere. So anytime you can contact me, you want to contact me, feel free to do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, somebody is asking in the comments though. It says, does mocking data make you nervous?
I don't know. I don't understand the question. No, I guess not. No, I would say no.